I have a question to ask. This is a class, a Sunday school class. How many here have had an aha experience? Raise your hands. Aren't they wonderful? Aren't they magnificent? They come out of nowhere, and they sort of enlighten us if we're halfway awake. I was told as a seminary student when it came time to take the general ordination exams, a friend of mine who had taken them the previous year, and they're pretty much of an endurance experience, she said to me that if you have half paid attention in class, you will do okay on the exams, because you will hear voices of lectures, of instructors that have talked to you over these past years. And don't you know it, that's exactly what happens. And this is what happened when I walked in here this morning and looked up and saw what the children had done. And like I say, a lively youth group, the choir, slept here last night, decorated the church before they slept, and then they sang at the 8 o'clock. That is a gift that you as a parish have. And that is a gift that we all have, is that aha moment, that wonderful moment of enlightenment when God seems to just simply tap us on the shoulder. And that's exactly what happened on that first Pentecost. One of the commentators that I read for this morning's sermon said that if you read the Gospel of John, which we have just read and heard, that you will find that John speaks of the Spirit as the Spirit is the one who continues the Spirit of Jesus. That Jesus continues in the world through the life of the Spirit. The advocate, as John often refers to him. Then Paul, who came along before John, several decades before John, speaks of Jesus, or speaks of the Spirit as that entity, that person, that part of the Trinity that brings us together and unites us as a faith community and bonds us into what I like to call the beloved community. And then Luke, who speaks to us through Acts, speaks of the Spirit as I said to the children just now, is the one who transforms our lives in such a way that we are compelled to go out and to preach the good news in places that we have least expected, and oftentimes to people that we have least expected. It's not as if this is just an old story that we hear and celebrate year after year. For instance, in the gospel this morning, Jesus walks through the door, miraculously in the day of the resurrection, and breathes the Spirit into the apostles. And then later on Pentecost, 50 days after the resurrection, we have the instance of the Spirit coming into that upper room through fire, through wind, through the breath of God, and forcing the apostles out into the square. So were there a mistake in this morning's readings? Did one of the evangelists happen to trip up and forget, whoops, I shouldn't have said that? No, because the Spirit has been moving from the beginning of time. In Genesis, the Spirit God breathes the Spirit over the water, breathes the Spirit over the earth, and creation unfolds. In Ezekiel, especially during Easter vigils, the Spirit is breathed into the bones. God said, breathe into those bones, Ezekiel, raise up a nation, raise up a community. And the Spirit is breathed in Ezekiel. And then through Matthew and John and Luke, the Spirit of God still comes. And guess what? That same Spirit comes to us this morning. And comes to Trinity at such an auspicious time in the life of this beloved community. Your rector has left after 27 years. This is the first Sunday that Father Kelly is not standing where I'm standing. But the Irish are still here because Murphy's here. So there's a new moment, a new opportunity that will happen because God has already decided who you will call after a period of reflection and discernment. So as much as a day is a day to say goodbye to your former rector and your former life with him, today begins a new life and a new opportunity for community that you perhaps cannot imagine, cannot fathom. Just as the apostles couldn't fathom where they were going to wind up. The wonderful New Testament scholar Raymond Brown has a book out, he wrote it years ago, called From Antioch to Rome, and he talks about the early days of the church, how the gospel spreads. And the beauty in that book is at the beginning when he said, all of a sudden, we don't hear of the apostles anymore. Acts is only about Peter and Paul. But all of a sudden, they just drift off as faithful followers of Jesus Christ. Some went to India, some went to Persia, some went to Cilicia, to places where Paul goes. Some stayed in Israel. They had no idea of what was going to happen. But because of their going out and their faithfulness, new communities arose through the gift of the Spirit, because they were all filled with that Spirit of Pentecost, just as you and I are. So happy Pentecost, happy journey, happy adventure, and happy birthday. Amen.